is indeed an industrious creature. He created the modern machine age by the cutting of metal and the manipulation of fire. Today's sleek jetliners are a symbol of modern civilization. This mass of intricately assembled parts frees itself from Earth's gravity and takes to the wide open skies. Has created a machine that can fly farther and faster than any bird. Ironically, however, this machine is not perfect because man made it. There is always the chance it will betray its maker. Japan. A jetliner bound from Sapporo in northern Japan abruptly vanished moments before it was due to land in Tokyo. It was the night of February 4th, 1966. The scheduled time of arrival at Tokyo International Airport was 19:02 hours. But the Boeing 727 never appeared. Hours later, floating objects were spotted in Tokyo Bay. Hope is lost for all 133 persons aboard. This was the start of a tragedy caused by the worst single airplane crash in history. The Boeing 727 crashed in Tokyo Bay, only 14 kilometers from Tokyo International Airport. In winter, Tokyo Bay is cold and rough. What went wrong with the Boeing 727 over the bay? The weather conditions were good. The sky was clear except for a few small clouds. There was no report of air turbulence. The cause of the disaster was shrouded in mystery. What happened up there? Was it loss of speed? An explosion? Engine failure? All told, 133 victims. They vanished in the cold winter sea. Why did these 133 have to die? What caused their death? An investigation was promptly begun to try and find the cause of this disaster. Mr. Juichi Narabayashi from the Civil Aviation Bureau, one of Japan's foremost experts in air disaster investigation. As in criminal investigation, air disaster investigation begins with an on-site inspection to obtain as many clues as possible. The landing flap apparently was not lowered, as indicated by the condition of this large boat. Investigators arrive from the United States. Apparently, the wheels, too, were not down at the time of the disaster. The plane was not in landing position. The pilot's cabin is raised from the sea. Perhaps some clue may be obtained from the instruments. The fire extinguisher levers. These levers are activated should an engine catch fire. The number 3 engine extinguisher lever appears to have been pulled. This is perhaps an important clue. Did anything abnormal occur in the number 3 engine? The levers for the number 1 and number 2 engines both measure 172 millimeters in length. But the lever for the number 3 engine measures 184 millimeters. Did the pilot possibly activate the lever? The engine meter that was next recovered also showed that engine number 3 had an abnormally low power output. From the left, the engine power meters read 2.04 for engine number 1. 2.06 for engine number 2, but only 1.18 for engine number 3. The fire extinguisher lever and the engine meter both cast suspicion toward the number 3 engine. Awaiting the recovery of the tail section that carries the engines. Frogmen take photographs at a depth of 20 meters. The mud of the seabed is disturbed, obstructing the view. February 15th. The tail section carrying the engines is recovered. The number 1 engine is on the port side, the number 2 engine in the center, and the number 3 engine on the starboard side. The number 1 engine was still attached to the tail section. The number 2 engine left its air intake and had fallen away. There is no sign of the 3rd engine. A gaping hole appears as if the engine had been forcefully torn out. The mount, which fixes the engine to the fuselage. 2 bolts in front and 1 in the rear do the job. Investigator Narubayashi seems to be interested in the scratches on the engine mounts. The remains of the ill-fated plane returned to Tokyo International Airport. The plane apparently disintegrated upon impact. The nose, fuselage, the wings, the tail assembly and engine sank separately to the bottom of the sea. 10 days have passed since the disaster. Most of the wreckage has been recovered and is stored in MacArthur Hangar at the airport. The center section has also been found. The controversial number 3 engine, which may hold the key to the mystery, is still missing. The number 3 engine must be found and examined. Other possible causes of the disaster could be fire or explosion inside the plane. Perhaps some structural defect or sudden loss of speed. Could the pilot have made an error? The Japanese government formed an investigating team consisting of well-known experts in the field. The head of the team is Professor Hidemasa Kimura. He has designed some of Japan's best planes. Take, for example, the YS-11 passenger plane, for which there is a potential market in the United States. Because of the seriousness of the Boeing 727 disaster, the foremost authorities have been called upon. Professor Yamana is an authority on structural dynamics. The position of a plane at the moment of impact can sometimes be determined from the way the broken metal pieces are twisted. It is assumed that the plane in question was flying almost horizontal to the water when it plunged into the sea. There are no signs that a fire or explosion occurred inside the plane. However, the lever of the rear door is open. Did someone open it? Someone who sensed something was going to happen shortly before the crash? The investigators divide into their respective fields to conduct separate probes. Rarely has a more critical eye been focused on a plane's design and structure. The Boeing 727, a medium-range jetliner, first went into service in February 1964. It is a very popular plane and is in service in many countries. Its 3 engines are located at the rear. For this reason, the tail assembly has a characteristic T-shape. The 3-fold flap is designed to increase the wing surface at takeoff and landing. Consequently, a Boeing 727 flying at Mach 0.87 at high altitude can decrease speed to that of an ordinary propeller-driven plane upon landing. Yet, in the first year and a half of service, there were 4 accidents involving a Boeing 727. In August 1965, a 727 plunged into Lake Michigan as it came in for a landing at Chicago. 3 months later, another 727 smashed into a hillside minutes before landing at Cincinnati. And 82 hours after this crash, a third 727 crashed and burned after touching down short of the runway at Salt Lake City. The Tokyo Bay crash was the 4th involving a Boeing 727. Moreover, all 4 occurred at night and shortly before landing. Speculation has been raised that because of the characteristic design of its flaps and T-shaped tail assembly, the 727 loses speed easily, sometimes fatally. The 727 is a highly efficient plane. Yet what was in it that betrayed the men who built her? On February 18th, the number 3 engine was found. Investigators rushed to the scene. The question in everyone's mind was, what clues may the number 3 engine hold? The mud-covered engine was slightly misshapen due to the force of the impact. There were no signs of an explosion. It was almost intact. But investigator Narabayashi was interested in one of the bolts with which the engine was mounted to the plane's body. The bolt was broken. It was the way the bolt was broken that interested the investigator. It is quite possible that this bolt broke due to metal fatigue while the plane was still in flight. Investigator Narabayashi thought not one moment should be lost. It was midnight, but he rushed from Tokyo to Professor Yamana's home 50 kilometers away in the suburbs of the city. The fact that the number 3 engine power meter showed a drop might suggest that the engine became unstable due to the broken bolt. If this is what happened, all companies with Boeing 727s in service throughout the world would have to be notified promptly. In Mr. Narabayashi's opinion, the topmost of the 3 bolts snapped due to metal fatigue. Then the next bolt broke, thereby causing the accident. If metal breaks from fatigue, a shell pattern is created. It is difficult to say whether there is a shell pattern on this bolt. A section of the suspicious bolt. This is the bolt that is believed to have broken next. The following day, the investigators assembled at MacArthur Hangar. Investigator Narabayashi's suspicions regarding the bolt stemmed from the scratches on the frame where the engine is mounted to the fuselage.
This この角度の合い方がこれとね、これだろうと思った。で、ちょっとここら辺りに来て、ここ来てるんじゃないか。前向きにギュッとこう傷つけたと思う。これを合わせたいんです。これは。
His explanation. From the direction and angle of the scratches, one can determine how the engine moved when the bolt broke. In this instance, the topmost bolt broke due to fatigue. However, Mr. Nagano, a member of the investigating team specializing in metallurgy, felt that the bolt broke upon impact when the plane hit the water and not through metal fatigue. The bolt became the subject of a heated debate. A more detailed investigation was launched.